GIRD is often the main cause of shoulder injuries. If you're a pitcher, if you're a volleyball hitter from the outside, it's going to make you way more likely for injury, and it's going to lead to more dead arm and decrease in velocity.
Welcome to the Movement Driven Podcast with Dr. Greg Goldberger, where we help you bridge the gap between pain and performance. Each week, we'll share strategies, insights, and real-life applications to help you keep moving and stay driven. Now, let's get into this week's episode of the Movement Driven Podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Movement Driven Podcast. I'm Dara Sweat here with Dr. Greg Goldberger. Greg, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. What's up?
Good, nothing. We're going to continue the third part of this shoulder series that we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks. And this definitely is not the final episode that we'll ever talk about shoulders, but at least for the sake of this series that we have going on right now, I think that this is going to be the last one. And then, of course, we'll move into some other topics moving forward. But specifically today, we're going to talk about the abbreviation GIRD. And I'm going to let you pronounce that acronym spelt out. And explain what it is and why athletes should care about it.
Yeah, for sure. So it's pronounced GIRD, not to be confused with like gastrointestinal reflux disease, which is GERD, which is another GIRD in the medical field. But this is GIRD, which stands for glenohumeral internal rotation deficit. Okay, so let's break that down. Glenohumeral is a fancy name for shoulder joint. That's your glenohumeral joint. Gleno means scapula. Well, that's the shoulder blade we've talked about in the last couple of episodes. And humeral is referencing to the humerus, which is your arm bone. And so glenohumeral joint is your shoulder joint. And then we talk about internal rotation deficit. Okay, so this is something we see in our overhead athletes, our throwers, if you will. Very prominent in our baseball players. That's where most of the literature is. But we see it also in like volleyball players that have been playing since a young age, and tennis players with a really wicked serve, and anybody with this repetitive overhead throwing type motion from a throwing sport, quarterbacks, or a racket sport. We're going to have the potential to develop what's called GIRD. Where we have decreased internal rotation of our shoulder joint, and that often is coupled with excessive external rotation of that same joint.
Okay, awesome. So how does it actually limit shoulder motion and affect performance, especially, and you mentioned some like throwing and serving and things like that in those overhead movements?
Yeah, well, I feel like first we should talk about like how it develops, and then we can get to how it affects performance. So when we're growing up, like through adolescence, when our bones are forming, when tissues are forming, if we're doing that motion, so like for me, for instance, I grew up playing baseball as my main sport. And so from the time I was 4 years old to throughout my entire development into adulthood, I was throwing a baseball over and over and over again, every week, every month, every year. And so that had an effect on how my right shoulder grew, basically. So effectively, my humerus and my joint grew with what we call a torsion. And so when I put my hands in like a field goal post position, my right hand can go way further back than my left, which shows I have excessive external rotation. And then when I go in, or when I go down, like a scarecrow going down, I have very limited on my right side. And so that's the deficit we were talking about. And so as you're growing up doing these sports, swimmers and overhead athletes, they can develop these torsions, which then have an impact on performance or potential for injury, which was your question. So how does it affect performance? So if we stay on kind of baseball, because baseball is where we see it the most. What happens every time I throw the ball, the front of my shoulder gets a little bit looser and the back of my shoulder gets a little bit tighter. That's just the simplest form I can put it. And what happens over time is when the back of that shoulder continues to tighten up, it pushes that ball forward and forward and stretches out all the structures in the front. And all the structures in the front are your labrum and your biceps and your rotator cuff, all the stuff that gets hurt. So essentially, this is one of the biggest things we see in terms of shoulder injuries, in terms of what's the root cause. GIRD is often the main cause of shoulder injuries in pitchers. And then if you don't, even regardless from a injury standpoint, if you have this limitation, you're going to have decreased velocity on the mound if you're a pitcher, decreased velocity if you're a volleyball hitter from the outside, all of these types of things, it's going to make you way more likely for injury, and it's going to lead to more dead arm and decrease in velocity.
Wow. Yeah, that's kind of incredible when you think about like, especially for throwers and swimmers and overhead athletes, like they're definitely going to be more likely to develop this issue because of that constant over and over and over
For
again.
sure.
So with that being said, typically most athletes, unless you're ambidextrous, you're doing that with with one side. Swimmers, obviously, you have to swim with both arms, so it's a little bit different. But can you explain how asymmetry between the dominant and the non-dominant arm plays into this problem?
Yeah, well, I think then you have like a rotational deficit through the spine too, because you're always rotating in the same direction too. So it's not just like limb to limb; it's you have an asymmetry of rotation. And then if you're in baseball, you're throwing and hitting, right? So now if you're right-sided on both, you're moving the same way, and that's just going to throw everything out of whack. So what's important is we have to address those asymmetries in the gym from a prehab or a strength training standpoint. And so we have to I like to always try to maintain as much equal mobility side to side as we can, as much equal strength side to side as we can. Now, in terms of GIRD, I'm not trying to increase your left shoulder range of motion externally to match your right, but I am making sure that we're increasing your right internal range of motion to match your left. So let me make that a little less confusing for the listening audience. When we talk about GIRD specifically, the main thing we focus on in terms of just addressing that joint is it's okay if you have excessive external and a deficit in internal, as long as you have a full 180-degree arc of motion. Okay. So in the literature, when I was doing a lot of lit reviews back in residency for throwers, I want to say the magic number was at least like 167. If you had 167 degrees, then you're golden. You're not going to have these stresses on these tissues because you have enough range of motion in both directions to display that force evenly, if you will. So the easy way to think about it is 180. So if I go back, I have to make that full arc of external to internal with my elbow, even with my shoulder, just like a thrower's motion of 180. So that's the main thing we're looking at with these types of individuals, these overhead athletes, in addition to creating symmetry across the body and doing rotation the opposite direction. With like my baseball players, my golfers, I'm doing lots, if they're right-handed, I'm doing lots of left-handed loaded rotation to even that out and make sure that the body can be resilient on the field.
Right. Right. So, what are some early signs that an athlete might be developing this before it turns into pain or a bigger injury?
Well, the easiest test, you can do this test right now sitting there. Another test that we did last time. If you do the good old, if you reach behind your back, can you touch your hands together? So one hand goes below your butt and then up your back, and then one comes above your head and down your spine. And you see, can I touch my fingertips together? Does that make sense? Can you imagine what I'm saying? Okay.
I'm doing
Yeah.
it right
So you want to see, you can do this in mirror too and kind of check behind you or have somebody take a picture of you. How much can you get your bottom hand up the spine? And then you switch sides. How much can you get your bottom hand up the spine?
now. Oh, there's definitely a difference.
Yeah. So for me, my right shoulder, which is my dominant where I threw, I can't get nearly as high up with that bottom hand on my right when it's on the right side. So that's a sign that you already have that deficit and you have to start doing XYZ mobility drills that we will give you once you come see us to make sure that you work on the mobility and prevent it from becoming an issue long term.
Wow, that was it's a significant difference. So like when I have my dominant arm on top, my fingers can touch almost like halfway down my fingers. When I switch and I have my right side, my dominant arm going up my back, like there's like probably an inch of space in between. Right. That's crazy.
So, and it probably feels tighter and your shader feels like it's rounding forward more. And so that's just a sign like there's a certain, domino effect of tissues that we have to mobilize on that right side. And I don't know if this is true, but is your right shoulder the one that gave you more issues?
Yeah, I think so. I would say so.
Yeah. So it's not always, but that's usually what we see is that limited range of motion usually lines up with a higher risk of injury.
Yeah, and you know what else too? I also the right side, my dominant side, is always where my massage therapist says that I store all of my stress. So I wonder like if that has a play into the ability for me.
Well, like there could be compensations, but then that could be feeding back into it, right? It's like this loop that's negative feedback loop that we see all the time.
That is wild. Well, awesome. So yeah, obviously what we want to do here is we want to come see you. We want to get some work, some exercises to help loosen that up a little bit so that we can have a more even distribution and be able to stretch things out. So if you're an overhead athlete noticing shoulder tightness or loss of motion, and you don't even have to be an athlete for this. Like if you're reaching above head to put stuff away in the kitchen and the pantry, we want you to schedule a movement screen to restore that rotation and keep your arm super, super healthy. I know that there's tons of things that we can do here at Movement Driven that will help you out. I know there's things that are already helping me out, and I'm as being a patient as well. So yeah, definitely want to give us a call, work with Dr. Greg or with Elza to get that shoulder mobility back so that you're not developing GIRD, which again, I'm not going to try to butcher pronouncing that abbreviation.
Glenohumeral internal rotation deficit.
Awesome. Well, great, Dr. Greg. Thank you so much for this. This is a really insightful episode. Hey, if you tried that test out while you were listening to this podcast, shoot us a message because I want to know what you guys also had for your
comment below.
Yeah, comment below. Send us a message. I'm curious about if you guys did that test and what your results were.
And if you are a thrower, like the dry needling works wonders on this type of stuff, honestly. So come in, let's do an assessment. Let's start working on your GIRD.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Dr. Greg. This was really great, and we'll see you next time.
See you guys.
Thanks for tuning in to the Movement Driven podcast with Dr. Greg Goldberger. Want to see how we're helping people in Jacksonville bridge the gap between pain and performance? Head on over to movementdriven.com. Until next time, keep moving, stay driven.